This is The World Today, 15 minutes of the latest news from around the world. I am Peninah Karibe. Coming up, political advisors from Russia, Ukraine, Germany and France hold talks in Paris over the Ukraine crisis. Burkina Faso military reopens airspace as thousands of citizens celebrate in support of the coup. And British Prime Minister under increasing pressure over Downing Street party scandal. Russia has launched new military drills near Ukraine and in the Crimean Peninsula. Tensions remain high despite a flurry of meetings among Russian, US, Ukrainian and European Union diplomats in a bid to de-escalate the situation. The meetings have yet to yield any significant breakthroughs. Stuart Smith reports from Moscow.
Another round of military drills on top of military drills already taking place by Russia. This time around 6,000 troops in Crimea, so troops there, and naval drills in the Black Sea. If you go to the east of Ukraine, on near the Russian border, there are around 100,000 Russian troops, according to Western intelligence estimates. And now north of Ukraine, in Belarus, there are Russian troops there too, as they take part in month-long drills with Belarus. We heard more talk, diplomatic talk going on in Europe. Again, how to make sure this does not end up with violence taking place. Both sides, Russia, the West, NATO, nobody says they want war, but we're getting the impression over this week that the European Union countries are trying to provide some kind of solid front as well. The Normandy format is being discussed on Wednesday, where Ukraine, Russia, Germany and France can meet together as a four and try and talk things through. But that has been the case for since 2014, and there haven't been any breakthroughs, so hopes not high for breakthroughs on Wednesday. We heard today Boris Johnson, the UK Prime Minister, talking about how the UK would help support NATO and the European Union.
We will not reopen that divide by agreeing to overturn the European security order because Russia has placed a gun to Ukraine's head.
A lot of European countries, the UK, the US, are talking about moving troops, military equipment and defences to Eastern European countries, part of NATO. Ukraine is not part of NATO, and no country yet has said it would help Ukraine with military support directly in the country by deploying troops. In Kiev, the emphasis seems to be on trying to keep people calm. Preparations are underway to make sure that there are, for example, bunkers, supplies in place should invasion happen. Having said that, Ukraine is not saying that imminent invasion is a possibility. Their intelligence suggests, should it happen, it would be in quite some time. That's contrary to the UK and the United States evacuating some embassy staff fearing imminent invasion. We should add again that Russia says that is not on the cards, although it is willing to take what it calls military technical measures should the United States and NATO not meet its set of national security demands. Stuart Smith, CGTN, Moscow.
French President Emmanuel Macron says he will seek clarification with his counterpart Vladimir Putin over Russia's intentions towards Ukraine. Both France and Germany have stressed their support for Ukraine. They say Russia will pay a high price if it attacks its neighbor. Berlin has also refused Kiev's request to allow weapons to pass through its borders to reach Ukraine. Croatian President Zoran Milanovic has described the crisis as the result of internal US policies. He has pledged that Croatian troops won't be part of any conflict. He says Ukraine should not become a member of NATO and has called for a peaceful solution to the ongoing tensions. Let's now go to Burkina Faso, where the military announced on Tuesday that the airspace has been reopened. So here's what we know so far since the military takeover. After the military announced they had removed Burkina Faso's president, Roch-Marc Kabore, from office, some citizens supporting the military action poured into the streets to celebrate. The president's whereabouts are still unknown. West African Regional Bloc ECOWAS issued a statement Tuesday saying President Kabore resigned under threat, intimidation and pressure from the military. French President Emmanuel Macron says he has been informed the ousted president is in good health and is not being threatened in any way. Macron says the situation appears calm in Burkina Faso. The events in Burkina Faso have elicited condemnation from the United States, the UN, ECOWAS and the G5 Sahel group. ECOWAS plans to meet in the coming days to examine the unfolding situation. And a day after closing all borders, the military junta on Tuesday reopened the country's air borders. All right, so let's now get the latest on the situation in Burkina Faso. We have Lucien Kambu, a local journalist, joining us via Skype from Ouagadougou. Lucien, the military says they have reopened air borders. How is the situation developing there?
Since yesterday, air borders have been opened back. For the transport, only a few types of vehicles are authorized: humanitarian vehicles and trucks, vehicle transporting foodstuffs, and vehicle transporting product and equipment intended for the Burkina Faso army. Schools, including universities, are still shut down till the 29th of January, but life is still on and businesses are open in Ouagadougou right now.
Some citizens have been celebrating in the streets in support of that military takeover. What about those who are opposed to the takeover? What are they saying?
Right now, there is not protesters that are in the street manifesting against the cap, but we do have a statement from political parties who condemn the military cap and demanded a restoration of democracy.
Do we have any word yet on the whereabouts of President Kabore?
At the time being, we do not have any information about President Kabore, but yesterday some information went out saying that just after the military cap, Roch Kabore was said to accept and be infiltrate, let's say taken to France, but he has refused this suggestion and stay in Burkina Faso. According to RFI, Roch Kabore is doing well and is free to talk to the members of his family. And at the time being, according to this media, he is in Ouagadougou, a district close to the presidency in Burkina Faso.
All right.
But at the time being, we do not have a word from President Roch Kabore himself.
Okay, thank you very much for that update. Lucien Kambu live for us in Ouagadougou. So that military takeover in Burkina Faso has had many people asking, who is Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Damiba? CGTN's Joy Kirukijuma unearths the little known about him.
41-year-old Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba is Burkina Faso's new junta leader. He has had first-hand experience of the country's brutal jihadist insurgency. This he cites as the reason for seizing power. Damiba heads the Patriotic Movement for Preservation and Restoration (MPSR) that on Monday overthrew the country's elected president, Roch Marc Christian Kabore. Kabore was facing public anger at his failure to stem insecurity. Damiba is commander of the 3rd Military Region, which covers eastern Burkina Faso, one of the areas worst affected by insurgency. He gained experience of the problems of Burkina Faso's poorly trained and ill-equipped security forces against ruthless and highly mobile militants. According to a military source, Damiba made no secret of his criticism of prevailing strategies to roll back the insurgency before the coup. Damiba trained at the St. George's Nomauno Military Academy in Po, southern Burkina. Many of his alumni served in the Presidential Security Regiment. He was a former presidential guard of Kabore's predecessor, Blaise Compaoré, who was overthrown by a popular uprising in 2014. Damiba also has close affiliations with France. He trained at the prestigious military school of Paris. He published a book last June titled West African Armies and Terrorism, Uncertain Answers. The French publisher says Damiba also earned a master's degree in criminal science at the CNAM Academy in France. Joy Kirukijuma, CGTN.
United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has expressed his concerns over the recent coup in Burkina Faso.
The role of military must be to defend their countries and their peoples, not to attack their governments and to fight for power. We have, unfortunately, in the region, terrorist groups. We have threats to international peace and security. My appeal is for the armies of these countries to assume their professional role of armies to protect their countries and re-establish the democratic institutions.
British police have begun an investigation into parties held in government offices during COVID-19 lockdowns. It follows the latest revelation that in 2020, a birthday party for Prime Minister Boris Johnson was attended by up to 30 people, at a time when most indoor gatherings were restricted to just 2. And Wilson reports from London.
This could hardly have come at a worse time for the Prime Minister. After weeks of refusing to engage, the Metropolitan Police Chief has suddenly changed her mind. Whatever it is they found out from the civil service investigation into parties in government offices, detectives have now decided that there may yet be evidence of wrongdoing after all.
And what I can tell you this morning is that as a result, firstly, of the information provided by the Cabinet Office inquiry team, and secondly, my officer's own assessment, I can confirm that the Met is now investigating a number of events that took place at Downing Street and Whitehall in the last 2 years in relation to potential breaches of COVID-19 regulations.
The latest leak to suddenly appear on the front pages concerns allegations of an impromptu birthday gathering for Boris Johnson inside Downing Street, complete with birthday cake and 30 staff. Ministerial strategy remains the same: play it down and refer to the ongoing investigation by civil servant Sue Gray.
I think most people would think a party as being an arranged event rather than something where on somebody's birthday in the office that they work in with the people that they always work with, someone says it's your birthday, here's a cake. But that is for Sue Gray to get to the bottom of.
But it's not hard now to gather an impression of impatience on London's streets.
I think the people who organised the party are still culpable, and it's just one thing after another, really. And I think the excuses are run dry, really.
It's more of the same, isn't it? It's like I don't expect any more from him, to be honest. I think everybody's expectations are totally at its lowest ebb at the moment.
The Prime Minister has said he welcomes the police investigation and that it will offer the clarity the public needs. But it's not yet clear whether 2 reports instead of 1 will be good news or otherwise for Downing Street. Andrew Wilson, CGTN.
And that's it for this edition of The World Today. I'll be back shortly with more news from across the continent on Africa Live. Thanks for watching.
This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
The latest from Burkina Faso as military reopens airspace after coup. Officials say up to 37 people dead as tropical storm Anna rips through southern Africa. And reports emerge of fresh fighting in northern Ethiopia. This is Africa Live. Thank you for joining us. I am Peninah Karibe. Also coming up, traders in Uganda protested tax increase on imported rice. In sports, Africa's fastest man, Omanyala, and Olympic great Kipchoge win big at the event. Madagascar, Mozambique and Malawi are counting losses after a tropical storm ripped through the three nations. The storm, known as Anna, made a landfall across the countries over the weekend. Authorities in Madagascar say at least 34 people have been killed, while Mozambique puts the death toll from the storm at 3. Malawi has not reported any fatalities, but the storm triggered major power cuts across the country. Thousands of people across the three countries remain stranded as heavy rains and floods swept their homes away. Chamgono tells us more.
Storm Anna, formed over the east coast of Africa's largest island, Madagascar, has brought heavy rains, causing flooding and mudslides in the capital and Tananarivo. Emergency evacuations have been launched as several low-lying districts of Madagascar's capital remain under high alert.
Our house is flooded with water. We have nowhere to go. We had to come here. Our children have fallen sick. We have no money at all. We don't earn anything. We can't go out to sell anything because there's a lot of water.
The reason we are staying here is because part of our house has collapsed. We are appealing for help. If we live here, we have nowhere else to go.
Across the Indian Ocean, heavy rains and strong winds were experienced in Mozambique's central and northern districts. Government and UN agencies estimate that 500,000 people may be impacted in the provinces of Nampula, Zambezia and Sofala. A clinic and 16 classrooms have been destroyed. In neighboring Malawi, the storm plunged most parts of the country into darkness. This is after flash floods raised the water levels, forcing the electric company to shut down its generators. Power is slowly being restored to residents across the country. Chamgono, CGTN.
Hundreds of people have marched through the streets in Burkina Faso's capital in support of the military coup. The city was packed with people cheering, singing and dancing. There were also reports of celebrations in other parts of the country. On Monday, the army ousted President Roch-Marc Christian Kabore and dissolved the government. But the UN, France and Burkina Faso's neighboring countries have condemned the takeover. The military on Tuesday announced the reopening of Burkina Faso air borders. Meanwhile, EU Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell will today co-chair a ministerial meeting of the G5 Sahel group in Brussels. The meeting comes as military coups continue to rattle the Sahel. To shed more light on the coups in the West African region, let's now bring in Dr. Andrew Yao Chie, a senior fellow at the Norwegian Institute of International Affairs. Thank you very much, Dr. Chie, for joining us. So the G5 Sahel Joint Force has been in existence since 2014, and yet in that time, the West African region has witnessed 4 successful coups. So then this begs the question, how effective and relevant is it?
Thank you very much for having me. I think it's important first that we separate the G5 Sahel from other governance issues. Yes, the G5 Sahel is made up of 5 countries, which compose of trying to settle armed conflict within the region, but also the G5 Sahel's mandate is really to enforce the mission's ability, in this case, to support wider development and continuity of regional securities. So if you separate the two, then really the G5 Sahel is the security side of things, in conjunction with other aspects with the UN and other regional forces that are in place. So really this is a governance, I would argue, issue that's taking place in the region, on the Sahel. And this is really off the backdrop of, you have already mentioned, of popular support from civilians for these types of coups, which really is an indication of, to some extent, that the democratic gains that many have argued that we've seen over the last 2 or 3 decades actually haven't really solidified the democracy that we would expect for the Sahel, but particularly for the Francophone countries, because this is in particular in relation to Guinea, Mali, Chad, who are all Francophone countries as well.
Right, so the coups we've witnessed in Mali, Guinea and now Burkina Faso have enjoyed wide support from citizens of those countries. Why are these coups seemingly popular with some citizens?
I think it's because there has been increased levels of violence being witnessed with no end in sight. So civilians are experiencing indiscriminate violence at severe levels, and that has continued. The performance of elites who are running the country have been questionable at a large extent. Some have made some gains, others continue to circle around the same issues and haven't moved the country forward. And what you have seen is constant instability. If you take Burkina Faso, for example, the original situation was, or instability was originally in Mali and made its way into Burkina Faso, and that instability continues. There's been a lack of governance, a lack of strong institutional building within or by these states as well. And I would say it's also being compounded by economic difficulties and other factors like COVID and continued corruption, which civilians have continued to cite as an issue as well.
So speaking of economic difficulties, we've seen the Economic Community of West African States being very vocal against these coups, even going as far as imposing sanctions on the ruling juntas. But it seems the sanctions are not yielding the desired results, I should say. Why?
I think sanctions to a degree have worked in some cases, not fully. I think in Mali, you are seeing some of that hit some of the people's pockets and trading and whatnot. So obviously, Guinea has kept its borders open to Mali, which has allowed Mali to continue to exist, just should I say, to trade. But they're not as targeted as, let's say, UN or UK sanctions that oftentimes hit the elites or are targeted to particular groups. So I think that doesn't help. But also, I think the wide issue that ECOWAS hasn't always been consistent here. While it's been the most vocal regional economic community, or should I say, mechanism in the African or across the African continent, it has been inconsistent when it comes to places like Guinea or Ivory Coast, where you see the extension of term times being extended from second to 3 terms. And I think this, to a large extent, has weakened the institution's own positioning, but has allowed, with the support of civilians, the coup leaders to feel emboldened to take the steps that they're doing. And Mali is that indication that we have here.
Dr. Andrew Yauchi, thank you very much for those insights. Meanwhile, Denmark is demanding Mali's transitional government to clarify on why it wants Danish troops to leave. Speaking to reporters on Tuesday, Danish Foreign Minister said the troops in the West African country are there on the basis of a clear invitation. Mali's transitional government had earlier said there were no consultations made during deployment and that it breaks protocol.
We have engaged in a thorough consultation with our partners, particularly those in Takuba, and I would like to affirm our solidarity with our Danish partners, whose deployment has a legal basis, contrary to what the Malian junta is claiming today. And in Africa, just as in Europe and Russia, through its actions and speeches, it favors a strategy of intimidation. It chooses masked confrontation, which is a destabilizing factor. We made this clear to our Russian counterparts back in November. So dealing with the hybrid threats that are unfolding below the threshold of open conflict is one of the priorities of the French presidency of the Council of the European Union through its strategic compass.
Fresh fighting has reportedly resumed in northern Ethiopia, threatening the distribution of humanitarian aid. Fighters from the rebel TPLF based in the Tigray region have confirmed fighting, claiming they were responding to attacks on their positions by pro-government forces in the neighboring region of Afar. Afar authorities have accused the TPLF of attacking towns located on the border with Tigray. Let's get the latest from our correspondent Girum Chala, who's live for us in Addis Ababa. Girum, reports of another conflict in the north. What do we know so far, and what is the government saying?
Peninah, the accusations and counter-accusations are coming both from the TPLF side and the Ethiopian government side. As you've said, the conflict has resumed. This can be reported now, but it is in the Afar regional state between the Afar Special Force and the TPLF fighters themselves. The Afar regional state has officially reported that TPLF fighters have been firing machine guns and also using heavy weaponry to attack different locations, including civilian locations in the Afar regional state, killing perhaps scores of people. The TPLF is saying that they are responding an attack waged by the Special Force of Afar, so they have continued the fighting. But in the middle of it all, the problem now is the humanitarian activity is being disrupted. So in general terms, what we can confirm is although war has subsided in almost all areas in the northern part of Ethiopia, which stayed for more than perhaps a year, there is now a beginning of yet another round of conflict between the Afar regional state and also the Tigray regional state fighters.
There have been hopes, Garoom, of a complete end to the conflict. What is the progress so far on the peace process led by the AU envoy Olusegun Obasanjo?
So, Peninah, there are two ways of explaining the peace process. One is a domestic initiative, which is called an all-inclusive national dialogue. This is the government's initiative, which is now under preparation as per the Parliament's endorsement of the rules of engagement. And almost all parties, including those in the Tigray regional state, are invited to take part in this dialogue, a national dialogue, which may or may not include TPLF itself, but there are also other opposition political parties based in the Tigray regional state that are expected to take part. The other one is, as we've said, the African Union initiative led by former Nigerian President Olusegun Obasanjo himself. President Obasanjo has been, undertaking shuttle diplomacy between Addis Ababa and Mekelle, the headquarters of TPLF, that is, speaking the rebels and also the federal government, including Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed himself. There were proposals the last time we've heard that the government and the TPLF leadership was expecting from Mr. Obasanjo so that he can show the way that, according to him, what would be a viable or trusted way of bringing these two parties for a round table discussion. But so far as we know, that initiative seems to be stalled somewhere. We have to hear from the African Union what they have to explain about this, but so far there is no progress from their side. But the internal dialogue, the domestic initiative itself, seems to be happening anytime soon, as the government freed opposition leaders from prison, including those which belong to the TPLF, and others are also considering ways of engaging with the government. So the peace initiative has two phases. The domestic one seems to be progressing. The one from the African Union side, we have to wait and hear.
All right, Groom, we appreciate the update. Thank you very much, Groom Chala, live for us in Addis Ababa. 28 minutes into the hour, you're watching Africa Live. We're taking a short break. Don't go far. We'll be right back.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Family members of victims of a boat accident that occurred in the Democratic Republic of Congo are pleading with the government to enforce strict measures to prevent marine accidents. At least 50 people died and more than 200 others were rescued in the accident that occurred in the northwestern province of Equator last Sunday. CGTN's Christo Chamringa reports.
A risky journey along the Congo River. Hundreds of Congolese living in the northwestern city of Mbandaka travel aboard these wooden boats daily to trade in major towns. But many died in a recent accident that occurred near Ipombo village. This family is mourning the loss of their daughter, Rodiasan Luzeze.
We got to an area called Ngele and recovered the body of our daughter last week. It was a very sad moment for us. We brought her body back to Mbandaka, bought a coffin and buried her. Neither the boat owner nor the government gave us any contribution.
The daughter was among 50 passengers who were recently reported dead. Many others are still missing. The family members are now calling on the government to enforce navigation laws to prevent such accidents from recurring.
It's very sad that our government allows some of those old boats in very poor condition to carry passengers. Accidents happen all the time here. We hope they put a stop to this once and for all.
The authorities in Mbandaka city were not available to comment about the allegation of laxity in the enforcement of maritime laws. It is true that the port is always busy. This is a typical boat that the people of Mbandaka used to get to other villages and cities around the DRC. It has 2 decks and a capacity of around 700 people. Sailing becomes difficult when it's overloaded, especially when it encounters bad weather. River accidents are common in the DRC. Last year, 60 people died and more than 200 were reported missing after the boat they were in sank on the Congo River. The government called on sanctions against those responsible, but the accidents have continued. One of the captains of these boats is calling on his colleagues to be more cautious.
Each one of us steering boats should be more responsible. If you know that the maximum limit of your boat is 750 people, and then you go ahead and allow 900 people on board, then you are the problem. We should be the first ones to ensure the safety of our passengers.
Hopes of finding more survivors from the latest boat accident are fading a week after the disaster happened. For the Longumba family, the pain of losing their daughter is hard to endure because they had high hopes in her. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Mbandaka, Democratic Republic of Congo.
The closure of schools in Kenya due to the COVID-19 pandemic and measures put in place after schools reopened have continued to affect the education sector. Enoch Sokolia reports on the challenges that have come with the resumption of learning.
Over 35 schools were set on fire in Kenya in the period between October and November last year. The increased cases of school unrest left parents and teachers worried. Ndumulikahi, the chairman of Kenya Secondary Schools Heads Association, partly attributed the unrest to a condensed school calendar as the government sought to recover the time lost during months of pandemic-induced closure.
One thing I would say that we may have not done very well was to sensitize the parents and the children to know that the calendar was going to be squeezed, so that as they come from home, they are psychologically set.
Before the COVID-19 pandemic, Kenya's school calendar had 3 terms of 3 months each, running from January to December. Between terms was a 1-month break for resting. These breaks were significantly reduced as government put in place a crash program to try and catch up.
So the children came to school and in the process discovered that the calendar was so squeezed, they didn't have that freedom, and that is how we started getting reactions from them. The teachers too got burnout.
So when these children learned that they only have 10 days for the holiday, they demanded that they want to stay home longer, and that actually was one of the causes that caused school unrest.
The decision to reopen schools in late 2020 was reached after the push to have students learn online failed. Most learners had no access to the internet or reliable electricity.
Unfortunately, for the 10 months our children are at home, it was only 20% of our children that had school online learning.
But these challenges have also led to innovation. One of them is what is happening here. The teacher behind me is teaching 2 classrooms. This one and another one 305 kilometers away. A government pilot is underway where lessons from a well-equipped school are streamed to an under-resourced one. If successful, the government plans to roll out the program nationwide. However, education experts like Indumuli maintain that school closures due to the pandemic have caused insuperable losses in education across the African continent. Enoxikolia, CGTN, Machakos, Kenya.
You're watching Africa Live. Coming up in business. Traders in Uganda protest a tax increase on imported rice. And Tanzania records $6 million from the sale of tourist hunting blocks, nearly twice what it earned in the last auction in 2019.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Tanzania says it has earned over $6 million from the sale of tourist hunting blocks. The government says it made $3.8 million more than what it collected in the last auction in 2019. CGTN's Daniel Kijo has more.
Tanzania is looking to grow its hunting safari sector. The government says the recent electronic auction of 45 tourist hunting blocks has earned the country more than $6 million. The blocks are graded in categories of 1 to 3, and bidders pay different fees depending on the category of the block.
For this auction, we had put up 75 hunting blocks for sale. About 49 hunting blocks will see their ownership end on the 31st of December 2022, and 26 hunting blocks had been opened. A total of 39 companies participated in the auction. 26 companies were able to lock down the hunting block, which is 54% of the companies that participated.
When starting its tourist hunting industry in the 1960s, Tanzania implemented the first block and quota system in Africa. It is famed for having the wildest range of game in all of Africa. The recent auction comes 2 years after the process was put on halt following the complaints of unfairness in allocating the hunting blocks. The government says the aim of the auction is to increase transparency and allow the market to compete to bring out the true value of the country's resources. The head of the Hunting Operators Association says the reserve fee for the hunting blocks this time was more than 4 times in some blocks. He says the unfair pricing threatens to eliminate local hunting operators from the sector.
Any increase on the price of the blocks will be reflected on the increase of the price on the safaris that are sold to the clients. Now, we used to get over 2,000 clients per year, Tanzania. Now we are only getting 400 and something. They say 500, okay, 500. What is that? It means we have fallen behind by 75%. Because this is only 25% of what we used to get. Now, if we have fallen that far behind and you are increasing the fees, it means you are increasing the cost. It means even this number will go down. You will never make the money.
The auction was initially scheduled for March last year, but the Ministry of Natural Resources and Tourism partly blames the delays on market instability caused by the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam, Tanzania.
Traders in Uganda are protesting against a tax increase on imported rice. The new levies require traders to pay more than double the original tax on a 100 kilogram of bag of rice. Most importers in Uganda had turned to Tanzania rice because of its quality and low price. CGTN's Leon Senyange has more.
Bukenya Bunya checks the last of his rice stock for sale this month. It has been more than 3 weeks since his latest order of rice came through.
The situation has not been good since the end of December. Even up to now, rice cannot come across because of the levies. I worry for the people that buy from us.
For every 100-kilogram bag of rice that he does manage to import from Tanzania, he now has to pay $5 in tax compared to $2 previously. It's a dire situation for almost all rice traders.
The income is so slow. We are not gaining anything because apparently you can get like 10 customers a day, but then most customers are just coming in to ask questions about the rice. Others are being frustrated just because they think we are having they think we're having prices that are going down soon.
The demand for rice in Uganda stands at around 380,000 metric tons per month. Local production caters for close to 60%. The traders have raised their concerns with the government and they are optimistic there will be a change in direction on the new taxes. However, that could take a while to achieve. In the meantime, experts believe there could be serious disruption to the supply chain.
If this tax is mandatory, they will have to pay it. It will have an implication on their costs of marketing, which they would have wanted to pass on to the consumer. But they have to watch at the competing products, the substitutes, the real substitutes, which are out there.
Currently, Uganda is a net importer of rice, with large amounts coming from Tanzania and Pakistan. Supporting the country's smallholder growers, experts say will boost Uganda's rice production and make the country less reliant on foreign imports. Leon Senyange, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Coming up in sports news. Africa's fastest man, Omanyala, and Olympic great Kipchoge win big at the Soya events.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
We begin in Cameroon, where Morocco are through to the last 8 of the Africa Cup of Nations of a 2-1 victory over stubborn Malawi. Morocco were clear favourites, but Gabadinho Mahango put Malawi into an early lead with an exceptional strike after just 7 minutes. Mahango had an excellent chance to extend the Flames' lead after 24 minutes, but shot just wide. Sofiane Boufal and Youssef Nesri both went close, and Wolves defender Romain Saiz struck the bar from close range. And eventually, Nesri's powerful header in stoppage time levelled the score at the end of the first period. In the second half, Achraf Hakimi put Morocco in the lead in the 70th minute when Hakimi struck a brilliant free kick curled over the wall and into the near top corner. Morocco's quarter-final opponents will be either Egypt or Cote d'Ivoire. 7-time champions Egypt take on 2-time tournament winners Cote d'Ivoire in a last 16 clash of the 2021 AFCON in Cameroon on Wednesday. The Pharaohs cannot afford any more mistakes, as CGTN's Adel Mahroui reports from Cairo.
4 games stand between Egypt and its dream of winning a record-extending 8 Africa Cup of Nations titles. Victory will continue Egypt's dominance over the most prestigious prize in African football. But the road to the precious title is full of African champions. The first to stand in the Pharaohs' way are the 2 times AFCON winners, the Elephants of Cote d'Ivoire.
It's a very difficult match. Cote d'Ivoire advanced. Surprisingly, most of us didn't see it coming. That is a big risk when you face a team you didn't anticipate. They have a very dangerous offensive line who play in the top European clubs. On the other hand, Egypt's forwards didn't appear strong in the group stage. We scored twice, 1 goal by a defender,
I'd say the match tends to be in Cote d'Ivoire's favor.
It's a very difficult and strong match for Egypt. The amazing performance by the Ivorians against Algeria was surprising and unexpected by all of us. There has since been growing fear ahead of this clash. Egypt needs to focus, organize its team structure and commit to tactical strategies which can make it win.
The Pharaohs can afford no more mistakes in their bid for the title. Experts say despite Côte d'Ivoire's threat, Egypt may still have a strong chance to win.
Côte d'Ivoire has a very strong midfield led by Frank Kessie, a brilliant player. Egypt must have a high passing rate between all players. The team must aim for penetrating the ball behind the Ivorian defense line. I think a 4-3-4 formation would be the best. I hope our defender Wench recovers so that we can build up our defense line with Hegazi and Hamdi Fathi.
The history between Egypt and Côte d'Ivoire could soothe the Pharaohs' fears from facing the elephants. They met 10 times in the AFCON. Egypt won 7 matches, including the 2006 final, while Côte d'Ivoire won only once. Yet 2 completely different generations of players will be clashing on Wednesday.
Egypt's game follows 2 inspirational matches in the round of 16. Tunisia, the 3rd-ranking team in its group, pushed away Nigeria, the only team in the competition with a clean sheet. And Comoros Island almost stopped the host Cameroon after losing half of its team for COVID-19 infections and playing with only 10 players and no goalkeeper. This is giving hope for the Egyptian fans here that the Pharaohs might still have a chance despite their poor performance at the beginning of the competition. Adil Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Meanwhile, the president of Confederation of African Football, Dr. Patrice Motsepe, has announced the suspension of the Olembe Stadium. The announcement came a day after 8 people died following a stampede ahead of Cameroon's last 16 tie against Comoros on Monday. Speaking at the press conference, the CAF president vowed that such a tragedy will never happen again at an AFCON tournament, adding that there were things that should have been foreseen. However, the incident has elicited reactions from locals who have different views on how the matter should be handled.
In all circumstances, when there is an event where people die, it is important to pause to honor the memory of the deceased. Then, responsibilities must be established. CAF's decision is a normal step. It is therefore necessary to carry out investigation and to discuss the lifting of the suspension of the Olembe Stadium later on.
It's true, the tragedy that happened is very serious, but I don't think that suspending use of the stadium is the best decision. We should have thought of more important security measures than those that are already in place. I think that at the organizational level, certain rules were not respected and there was negligence, which is what caused this tragedy.
I think the suspension of the stadium is justified because there was a loss of life. 8 people who died in such circumstances is a lot for me. It was therefore necessary to take strong measures. However, if CAF has the results of the investigation it commissioned, it should lift the suspension.
2-time Olympic champion Eliud Kipchoge and also Faith Chepngetich, as well as African 100 meters record holder Ferdinand Omanyala, were the big winners at the 18th edition of Kenya's Sports Personality of the Year Awards Gala held in Kakamega County. The ceremony brought together the Kenyan sports top performers of 2021. World Under-20 World Walk champion Heriston Wanyonyi won the Most Promising Boy award. In the Most Promising Girl award category, Teresia Gateri, who claimed the 3,000 meters gold at the Nairobi 2021 World Under-20 Championships, was crowned. Charles Okere was named Coach of the Year following his success with the national women's team and the Sekafa Women's Champions Vihiga Queens. The award of the Women's Sports Team of the Year was taken home by Vihiga Queens. We'll bring you more on this in our subsequent bulletins. In European football, Anthony Martial has joined Spanish club Sevilla on loan from Manchester United until the end of the season. The move was confirmed by the clubs on Tuesday after the Frenchman completed a medical. Martial joined the Red Devils from AS Monaco in 2015 and has made 269 appearances for United, scoring 79 goals. However, the 26-year-old has struggled for regular first-team action this season, making just 2 starts in the Premier League, both of which came under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer before the Norwegians' departure. Martial joins a Sevilla side which are currently fighting for the La Liga title as they trail leaders Real Madrid by 4 points, having both played 22 games. In tennis, former French Open champion Iga Swiatek advanced to the semi-finals after a 4-6, 7-6, 6-3 win over Kaya Kanepi. Swiatek improved on her stellar record against players ranked outside the top 30 at Grand Slam tournaments to advance. The 36-year-old Kanepi, who is ranked 115th, was playing in her 7th Grand Slam quarterfinal and was coming off an upset win over number 2 ranked Aryna Sabalenka. Swiatek will play American Danielle Collins in the semi-finals on Thursday night.
I'm pretty glad that I have my voice because I was shouting so loud that I'm glad it's here. And because of it, I can thank you for support because really this match was crazy and without the energy on the stadium, I think it would be really hard to win it.
We're over to Beijing, and Tuesday was the third day of the trial opening of the 3 Olympic villages in Beijing, Yanqing and Zhangjiakou. Personnel from more than 30 representative teams have arrived at the Beijing Winter Olympics villages. Their main task is to hold a final registration meeting with the Beijing 2022 operations team. No matter which village a delegation stays in, its personnel team must first go to the Beijing village for a final accreditation meeting with the operations team to confirm the qualification of the delegation's athletes, accredited number, delegation access authority, number in each Olympic village, accommodation locations, vehicles and other details. The 3 villages will officially open to the world on Thursday. The athletes in the village praised the facilities and services, saying they feel safe and that they look forward to the games.
Snow welcomed all the teams, so we have a feeling that indeed this is winter games, truly winter games. It looks very safe, so I hope that it will stay like this. All the volunteers and service providers are very friendly, so far we have received all the help we needed. So all the work you have done, preparation for the last years, will make it all happen, and everybody will be safe and will enjoy the games.
In basketball, Nikola Jokic was in good form as the Denver Nuggets defeated Detroit Pistons 110-105. Jokic had 28 points, 21 rebounds and 9 assists, with Monte Morris making 4 free throws in the final 11.5 seconds to help with the victory. Cade Cunningham led Detroit with 34 points, 8 rebounds and 8 assists. Cunningham was on top of his game, helping to pull the Pistons within 4 points, but Sadiq Bey missed at the rim and Cunningham came up empty on a pair of jumpers. Let's go to South Africa now, where strong waves battering Cape Town's coastline have inadvertently unearthed a decades-old shipwreck. The Antipolis oil tanker was wrecked in 1977 and had been submerged since then until strong waves lifted it off the ocean floor. Now the wreck is perched on rocks and is in full view of a curious public. CGTN's Travis Andrews tells us more.
Like a ghost from the past, after 44 years under the sea, the Antipolis wreck has risen again on the Atlantic seaboard. The shipwreck has been a popular attraction for scuba divers willing to brave the cold waters of the Atlantic Ocean. Unusually high waves battering Cape Town have lifted the wreck off the ocean floor, and it is now attracting people keen to see it.
Absolutely incredible to understand that it's been under the sea for that long. I heard from my brother in London, who used to live in Cape Town, that he dove here quite often, and it was one of the features here. It's amazing to find that it's actually on the shoreline now. So I came out to have a look, so I heard from him in London actually, not even locally in South Africa, and I think it's absolutely incredible.
With the wreck showing signs of a time spent underwater, strong waves are continuing to batter the damaged hull. Cape Townians have been warned to keep a safe distance as many make their way to see the wreck lodged on the rocks.
It's a beautiful shipwreck that's been there for a long time, the Antipolis, and it's been brought up after these really strong swells, and that's a nice thing to see right now that you can see at the surface.
The wreck is around 25 meters long and stands 4 meters high, and her presence highlights the extraordinary power of the ocean. After more than 4 decades, the Antipolis has finally revealed herself, And for some, a presence brings back old memories.
I actually swam out to it soon after it came aground, or went aground, and managed to retrieve the ship's compass. So I've got the ship's compass for this ship at home in London.
But our plans are not clear what authorities will do with the shipwreck, but it's likely they will leave it to spend its days at its new resting place. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
And that's where we'll leave it for now. We welcome your feedback. Send it to the contacts on the screen and follow us on our digital media platforms. I'm Peninah Karibe. Thank you for your company.